The air in the boardroom feels like old money and colder ambition. It smells of polished wood and a quiet ruthlessness I know intimately. Not because I possess it, but because I grew up surrounded by it. My father sits at the head of the table, his face impassive. My older brother, Michael, leans back, a predatory gleam in his eyes. We're looking at projections, charts, acquisition targets. It's Tuesday. 3 days ago, it was Saturday. Saturday was supposed to be our 10th anniversary. We had the cruise booked, the one we'd talked about since our honeymoon. A week in the Caribbean, just us. Or so I thought. Instead, Saturday morning, I got a text. A picture, sent by a mutual friend, someone who knew everything about my life, including the anniversary cruise details. The friend thought I'd be thrilled to see my husband looking so happy boarding the ship. He was happy, radiant even. And he wasn't alone. Her name is Sarah. She works in his company marketing. Younger, blonder, holding his arm, boarding our anniversary cruise. The picture wasn't a candid shot. It was posed. They were looking at the camera, smiling, smirking maybe, like they wanted to be seen. The air in the boardroom is thick with the weight of numbers, but my own air is thin. I'm breathing through static. 3 days. 3 days of pretending to everyone, including him, when he occasionally texts some generic work excuse, that nothing is wrong. 3 days of a cold, hard knot tightening in my chest, just below where my ribs meet. It doesn't ache. It's beyond ache. It's the feeling of concrete setting inside you. I see their faces on the ship's deck now, not in a picture, but seared onto the back of my eyelids. The sun is bright. The water is impossibly blue. The smile on his face is one I haven't seen directed at me in months, maybe years. Sarah's hand rests lightly on his chest. It's a casual gesture. Possessive. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. My life before Saturday felt solid. Predictable. Comfortable. We had the house, the cars, the right friends, the annual Hamptons rental. He was the ambitious executive. I was the quiet partner from a wealthy, influential family. My family built things. Tangible things. Real estate empires, infrastructure, transportation networks. My father taught us young. Power isn't loud. It's quiet, strategic, absolute. My life with James wasn't part of the family business, not directly. I worked for a nonprofit, something I cared about, something removed from the high-stakes world of finance and acquisition. James admired my family, of course. Respected them. Maybe a little too much. He was always eager to impress my father. Always asking Michael for business advice. He saw them as resources. Leverage. He never seemed to understand that they were my family. That I was part of this intricate, silent web of influence. The anniversary cruise was my idea. I'd booked it months ago. Paid for it. He was thrilled, or pretended to be. We talked about the ports, the onboard shows, the fancy dinners. He was busy, always busy, but he promised he'd clear his schedule. He kissed me goodbye Friday morning, briefcase in hand, a quick peck on the cheek. Said he had an early flight for a last-minute conference call out of town, but would be back Saturday morning, just in time to head to the port. It was a lie. Every bit of it. He flew out Friday, but not for conference. He flew to the port city, met Sarah, and boarded the ship Saturday morning. Our anniversary. The first hour after seeing that photo was a blur of nausea and cold sweat. I sat on the edge of the bed, the phone shaking in my hand. My impulse was primal. Scream, cry, call him, demand, accuse. Burn everything down. But the cold knot in my chest told me to stop. My father's voice echoed in my head, calm and measured. Emotion is a luxury you can't afford when faced with an adversary. Observe. Analyze. Act. He wasn't just an adversary. He was my husband. The man I built a life with. The man whose shirts were in the closet, whose toothbrush was in the cup, whose coffee cup sat by the sink. The mundane reality of our shared space screamed the lie even louder than the picture. My early struggles were internal. The fight against the rising tide of humiliation and pain. The urge to lash out, to make him hurt as much as I did. I drafted texts, furious paragraphs, then deleted them. I paced the house, a caged animal, the quiet luxury of our home suddenly feeling like a prison built for one. I looked at our wedding photos, at the smiling faces, and felt a profound, disorienting emptiness. Was any of it real? Or was I just another acquisition target he had moved on from? I called my brother, Michael. He is the executor of the family's more complicated ventures. He listens, his silence on the other end of the line more potent than any exclamation. I don't have to explain the depth of the betrayal. He hears the ice in my voice, the absence of tears. That's enough for him. I tell him about the cruise, about Sarah, about the anniversary. I tell him James used my credit card, linked to our joint account, to pay for Sarah's cruise fare. That detail, more than the infidelity itself, felt like a physical blow. It wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It was a calculated, financial insult. Using our money to flaunt his affair. Michael's response is simple. What do you want to do? That question hangs in the air. What did I want?
Divorce, obviously.
But that felt too simple. Too clean. He took our anniversary. He used our life to build his lie. Divorce felt like letting him off too easily, like giving him a clean escape route back into his new, shiny life with Sarah. I wanted something more. Something that felt like rebalancing the scales, not just cutting the rope. I spent the next day gathering information. Not about Sarah. She was just a symptom, not the disease. About him. His work schedule, his upcoming meetings, his financial state, his vulnerabilities. It felt clinical, detached. Like preparing a case for court. Only the court was the universe, and the judgment would be delivered on a scale he couldn't possibly imagine. I accessed shared files, checked his digital footprints. He was sloppy, so confident in my ignorance. I found emails to Sarah, gushing, planning. Found messages to friends, joking about his business trip. Each word was a small cut, but the cuts didn't hurt as much as the initial blow. They just solidified the concrete inside me. The real shift happened on Monday morning. I was in my father's office, ostensibly discussing foundation grants, when the cruise line came up. Not our cruise specifically, but the industry. My father was considering diversifying. A large cruise line, a global player, was quietly on the market. Discussions were preliminary. Michael had done some initial due diligence. The name of the line, it was the same one James and Sarah were currently sailing on. A quiet click sounded in my mind. The cold knot didn't loosen. It hardened into a weapon. The scattered pieces of my pain, my anger, my family's resources, the timing, they all snapped into place. This wasn't just about getting even. This was about demonstrating a fundamental truth James had completely failed to grasp, that marrying into my family meant he was never truly independent of its gravity. He thought he could use us, take from me, and sail away clean. My father looked at me, noticing my sudden stillness. My usual easygoing demeanor had vanished over the weekend, replaced by something he recognized. The look he gave me wasn't parental warmth. It was the look of a general assessing a battlefield. "Something on your mind?" he asked, his voice low. I laid it out. Not just the affair, but the using of the joint funds, the anniversary, the utter disregard. I explained the timing, the specific ship, the confluence of events. I didn't ask for revenge. I presented a strategic opportunity, a way to leverage a personal affront into a business maneuver, a way to deliver a consequence that was proportionate not just to the betrayal, but to the arrogance of it. My father listened, his eyes scanning my face. Michael leaned forward, his earlier boredom replaced by sharp interest. The air thickened with unspoken possibilities. This was the midpoint shift. The moment the path diverged from quiet suffering and private divorce to something public, powerful, and meticulously orchestrated. The suffering didn't disappear, but it was transmuted into fuel. My father tented his fingers. "The acquisition is complex," he said slowly. "Regulatory hurdles. Shareholder approvals. It could take months." "We don't need to complete the acquisition," I said, the words coming out steady and clear. "Not yet. Not for this." We just need control. Leverage. Enough to make an announcement. Michael smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a wolf scenting blood. A hostile takeover, he murmured. Or just enough strategic buying to force the board's hand.
Get a seat at the table.
Influence operations. Exactly, I said. Just enough influence to send a message. A very specific message. To one very specific person. Currently at sea. The following days were a blur of intense, quiet activity. Lawyers, financial analysts, proxies. My family's network moved with breathtaking speed and efficiency. Board members were pressured, shares were bought in strategic blocks, emergency meetings were convened. The gears of a vast, powerful machine were turning, powered by cold capital and my even colder resolve. This was the rising challenge, keeping it all secret. Maintaining the facade with James when he called from the ship, breezy and oblivious, asking if I missed him. Each call was an exercise in emotional suppression. I spoke in flat monosyllables, pretending to be busy with work emergencies he bought it, or didn't care enough to question it. He was too preoccupied with his romantic getaway. He even complained about the Wi-Fi, making it hard to check in. I just listened, my heart a stone in my chest, feeling nothing but a chilling detachment. The deeper crisis wasn't the fear of being caught. It was the fear that maybe, somehow, the plan wouldn't work. That the sheer scale of it, the complexity of manipulating a corporate takeover to deliver a personal humiliation, was too audacious. That something would go wrong. That he would somehow slip away, unscathed, back into his oblivious world. The other deepening crisis was the loneliness of it. I was surrounded by family support, by professionals executing my plan, but the core of the pain, the betrayed love, was something I carried alone. Every night was a battle against the images in my head. James and Sarah, laughing on a deck, sharing a meal, dancing under the stars I was supposed to be watching with him. The turning point came late Thursday night. Michael called. His voice was clipped, efficient. "It's done," he said. "Emergency board meeting concluded an hour ago. We have enough strategic control to influence policy. Effective immediately." "And the announcement?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Scheduled," Michael confirmed. "Global announcement going out to all ships in the fleet. Company-wide memo. Press release drafted. The one you wanted. It's happening. Tomorrow. Mid-cruise. Perfect timing." A strange calm washed over me. Not triumph, not yet. Just a profound sense of inevitability. The machine had reached the end of its cycle. The trap was set. Friday morning. I wasn't on the ship. That would have been too emotional, too messy. I was in my father's office, watching a live satellite feed of the ship's central atrium cameras. Michael was there, a faint smirk playing on his lips. My father watched with his usual quiet intensity. The ship was bustling. Passengers were milling about, heading to breakfast, planning their day. James and Sarah were visible, sitting at a table near a railing, drinking coffee, laughing. He had his arm around her chair. They looked comfortable, entitled. The ship's PA system crackled to life, interrupting the cheerful ambient music. All across the ship, speakers came alive. Passengers looked up, curious. The voice was clear, official. "Good morning, esteemed passengers. This is your captain speaking. We have an important announcement from the cruise line's corporate office." James and Sarah paused, their coffee cups halfway to their lips. They exchanged a casual glance. Effective immediately, the voice continued, amplified across every deck, every cabin, every public space. "We are pleased to announce a significant change in ownership structure. The controlling interest in this cruise line has been acquired by a new holding group led by..." The voice paused, just for a beat. On the screen, I saw James take a sip of coffee, completely relaxed. The Sterling Corporation. The Sterling Corporation. My family's primary holding company. The name is synonymous with immense wealth and quiet, absolute power. On the screen, I saw James choke on his coffee. He sputtered, his eyes wide. Sarah looked at him, confused. Other passengers didn't react much. Corporate mergers aren't exactly prime cruise gossip. The captain's voice continued, oblivious. We are excited about the future under Sterling Corporation's leadership and look forward to continuing to provide you with unparalleled vacation experiences. James was shaking his head, denying what he heard. He fumbled for his phone, probably to check the news, to confirm the impossible. Sarah was trying to get his attention, asking what was wrong. The captain concluded, "We anticipate a smooth transition. As part of this transition, certain personnel changes are being implemented across the fleet, effective immediately." This was the core of the twist, the lever pulled at the perfect moment. My family hadn't just bought the line. They'd done it specifically to gain control, to have the authority to make certain personnel changes. Specifically, the voice announced, and now it took on a slightly firmer, less cheerful tone, "We have received instruction regarding 2 individuals currently on board the ship, sailing under the names James Peterson and Sarah Jenkins." James froze. Every muscle in his body went rigid. His eyes, previously scanning his phone, snapped up towards the nearest speaker, then darted wildly around the atrium. Panic was a raw, visible thing on his face. Sarah looked bewildered, then scared, sensing the shift in atmosphere, the sudden attention from nearby passengers who were now looking at their table. "Mr. Peterson and Ms. Jenkins," the captain's voice boomed, echoing through the atrium. "Your presence on board is no longer welcome. You are instructed to proceed immediately to the purser's office, where arrangements will be made for your disembarkation at the next available port of call. Your cruise fares are forfeit. Any attempts to resist or delay will result in the involvement of onboard security." Silence. A stunned, absolute silence fell over the atrium. Every eye was on James and Sarah. His face went from red with shock to a ghastly white. Sarah was pale, shrinking in her chair. Then the scream. It wasn't a scream of pain, or fear, or even anger. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated disbelief. The sound of his reality shattering. It ripped from his throat, a raw, animalistic bellow that cut through the silence, like a physical blow. He slammed his hand on the table, scattering coffee cups. "And oh," he roared, his voice cracking. "You can't. What is this?" He looked around frantically, as if searching for an enemy in the crowd. His eyes were wide, desperate. He didn't understand how. He couldn't possibly connect his secret affair on a pleasure cruise to a sudden corporate takeover and his public expulsion. The sheer, unimaginable scale of the consequence was breaking his brain in real time. Sarah was pulling on his arm, whispering frantically, "James, what's happening?" 2 burly, uniformed security officers appeared seemingly out of nowhere, moving with quiet purpose towards their table. James saw them and scrambled back from the table, bumping into a startled passenger. His composure was completely gone. He was a cornered rat. "You can't do this," he yelled again, louder this time. "I'm James Peterson. My wife is—" He stopped. His voice died in his throat. His eyes fixed on something unseen by the cameras, maybe just the dawning, horrifying realization. His wife. My family. The Sterling Corporation. The dots connected. Too late. On the screen, the security officers reached the table. One addressed James calmly, firmly. James gestured wildly, still yelling incoherently, but his defiance was hollow. It was the flailing of a drowning man. The other officer nodded toward Sarah, who stood up shakily, looking utterly terrified. They were escorted away, not roughly but with an undeniable authority. The crowd parted for them, eyes following their humiliating walk across the atrium. James was still protesting, though his voice was lower now, defeated. Sarah was silent, her face a mask of shock and shame. I watched it all from the quiet room in my father's office. I felt empty, not triumphant, not joyous. The cold knot was still there, perhaps a little looser, but replaced by a vast, echoing hollowness. I had delivered the consequence. I had rebalanced the scales in a way he would never forget. But the cost felt immeasurable. The man I loved, or thought I loved, was gone, replaced by a stranger I had just publicly destroyed. The scream lingered in my ears. The sound of ultimate blindness meeting ultimate consequence. He thought he was just having an affair, a little side trip. He didn't realize he was standing on ground my family owned. The aftermath wasn't a Hollywood ending. There was no swelling music, no grand moment of personal vindication. Just the quiet turning of pages. The divorce was swift, uncontested. James signed everything, his spirit broken. He lost his job, too. The company he worked for had close ties to my family's network. His reputation was in tatters. Sarah vanished from the periphery of my life. I heard she moved away. My family didn't crow about it. This wasn't about public spectacle for them. It was about protecting one of their own and executing a strategic opportunity. The cruise line acquisition proceeded, a footnote in the larger story for the business world. For me, the closure was slow, like the tide receding. I learned that betrayal leaves scars, even when you win the battle. The trust was shattered, maybe irreparable. The easy confidence I once had in my life, in my judgment, was gone. But something else emerged from the wreckage. A quiet strength I hadn't known I possessed. I had faced the deepest hurt and responded not with impulsive destruction, but with cold, strategic power. I hadn't just survived. I had asserted myself on a scale I never imagined. I wasn't just the quiet partner from a wealthy family anymore. I was someone who understood leverage, consequence, and the terrifying power of acting without emotion when it mattered most. The hollowness remains sometimes, a phantom limb of the life I thought I had. But it's less frequent now. I'm building something new, something entirely my own. It has nothing to do with husbands or cruising or corporate power plays. It's quieter, more personal, and it's real. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.